But I think Cuba's the end. All my life I've been hearing about the United States and Cuba. When will the United States do it? I do believe I'll be having the honor of taking Cuba. That'd be good. That's a big honor.
Taking Cuba.
Taking Cuba in some form, yeah. Taking Cuba. I mean, whether I free it, take it, I think I could do anything I want with it. You want to know the truth? They're a very weakened nation.
It's Ken Harbaugh with the MeidasTouch Network. Sometimes I'll watch a video of Donald Trump like this one, and it is so unhinged that I'll have to double check that it's not AI generated. This statement about Cuba is exactly the kind of thing we have been warning about. A mad king with a lust for power, thinking he can take anything he wants by force. One of the realities that is now setting in for the Trump regime is that the U.S. military is about the only institution of government remaining that can deliver to Donald Trump what he wants. The DOJ has been a constant source of embarrassment, with Pam Bondi and Kash Patel unable to insulate the president. DHS under Kristi Noem was incompetence epitomized. And from what we've seen of Mark Wayne Mullen, who's been nominated to replace Noem, I don't think that's going to improve. But the military, even under Pete Hegseth, the U.S. military gets it done, at least in the short term. We are really good at projecting power, not so good at long-term planning, much less regime change. But we still have the mightiest military in the history of the planet. And that has become Donald Trump's go-to instrument, which begs the question, when and how will the military stand up to him? I asked retired Air Force Major General Stephen Lepper to join me to talk about this. General Lepper served for 35 years as a JAG officer, including as Deputy Judge Advocate General, one of the military's top lawyers. He is also one of the country's foremost experts on military law, unlawful orders, and the legal limits of executive power. Here's our conversation. General Lepper, thank you so much for joining me today. I get a lot of feedback from my audience about why the military, why the people in the military from the leadership on down are going along with this. And I would love your insight into the difference between a stupid order and an illegal order, because they are very distinct things, and the obligations as a service member are different depending on which one you get.
Well, that's a good question. First of all, thanks for having me on your show. I really appreciate it. We are struggling as well to educate and inform our fellow citizens on the distinction between lawful and unlawful orders. And the problem is that distinction doesn't really clearly exist in the Uniform Code of Military Justice. It's really hard to define what we mean by unlawful order when that word doesn't really exist. That term isn't really defined in the UCMJ. And so what we've tried to do as former JAGs who have practiced in this area during our military careers is try to look at the UCMJ and start from first principles. The first principle that we have to look at, we have to acknowledge, is that there is a strong presumption in military law that all orders are to be obeyed, that every order is lawful. And it has to be a strong presumption. Otherwise, the good order and discipline that you rely on to have an effective military will fall apart. So starting from that presumption, which is, like I said, very, very strong, we then have to, sort of define what a lawful order is. And a lawful order is basically any order to engage in any lawful activity. Unlawful orders are traditionally viewed as orders to commit a crime. Okay, that's what we traditionally look at as unlawful orders. So the easy examples are My Lai during Vietnam, where Lieutenant Calley orders his soldiers to kill civilians. That's a clear violation of the law of armed conflict. It was murder, and an order to engage in that kind of activity was clearly unlawful. More recently, we look at Abu Ghraib, the prison that we had in Iraq, and the conditions that were inflicted on the prisoners there by our soldiers, by the folks who were administering that detention facility. Clearly, the things that the folks who were responsible for the detention of those prisoners were doing to those prisoners was unlawful, and orders to engage in that behavior were unlawful and should have been disobeyed. Once you move from those standard, easy to understand examples, it becomes harder to define what is an unlawful order. And so what we've been doing, especially in the wake of the video that was developed by the senators and representatives that basically advise military members that they have an obligation to disobey unlawful orders, is an effort to try to identify when and where those orders should be disobeyed. And that's the challenge we have now with Iran. It's the challenge we had with the boat strikes. And we're finding that those challenges are increasing as our military is being asked to do things that we haven't done before.
This episode is brought to you by Pocket Hose, the world's #1 expandable hose. Look, I've wrestled with enough old school garden hoses to last a lifetime. The kinking, the tangling, dragging 50 feet of heavy rubber around the yard. The Pocket Hose Copperhead is a completely different experience. The Copperhead's pocket pivot swivels 360 degrees at the spigot, so you get full water flow and total freedom to water all around your home without fighting the hose. And when you're done, this rust-proof anti-burst hose shrinks back down to pocket size, no winding, no coiling, no hassle. It's super light, ultra durable, and backed with a 10-year warranty. I'll be honest, I didn't think an expandable hose could hold up, but this thing has changed the way I think about yard work. For a limited time, my listeners can get a free pocket pivot and their 10-pattern sprayer with the purchase of any size Copperhead hose. Just text Ken to 64,000. That's KEN to 64,000 for your 2 free gifts with a purchase. Ken to 64,000. Message and data rates may apply. See terms for details. It's Ken Harbaugh. What you're about to see in this trailer for the upcoming Midas Defense documentary, Drone Hunters of Kherson, is real combat footage shot by me and my crew in Ukraine. Over the past few years, I've gone back to the front again and again, embedding with Ukrainian suicide drone crews and anti-drone units from rooftops overlooking Kyiv to the Black Sea coast to trenches outside Kherson. That access didn't come easily. It took time and a level of trust that gets built by showing up when others won't. Drone Hunters of Kherson is the culmination of that work, a documentary that puts you inside the units that are writing the playbook for the battlefields of the future. What these crews are doing right now in Ukraine, the tactics, the technology, the bravery, has direct bearing on what American forces are facing in the Middle East today. This is the future of warfare, and it's not theoretical. It's happening now. The contest between who gets who first. Do they get the drone? Or does the drone get them? We're that close to the front. There's rubble everywhere, but people are still surviving. We just got an alert that there is a wave of 12 Shaheeds flying in over the Black Sea. There! That's the amazing thing about this war. It's a blend of trench warfare and Terminator. The threshold, though, for determining the illegality of an order is really high. I mean, like you said, it's easy when it's My Lai. It should be easy when it's Abu Ghraib. But when it comes to the kinds of orders our sailors, soldiers, airmen, Marines are getting in the Gulf right now, there isn't a clear example to me yet of an illegal order. There are certainly stupid orders, and the planning or the lack of planning that went into this is just a striking indictment of this administration's incompetence. But when an airman gets an order to go strike a target without a very clear indication that that's an illegitimate target, which almost never happens, there is an obligation under the UCMJ to carry out that order.
That's exactly right. Unless the pilot knows that the target he or she is being asked to destroy is something that's protected, a church, a school, a civilian, a place where civilians are congregated, then the obligation, as you said, is to attack the target.
And it is the job of JAGs. They have a critical function in this decision matrix to inform the commanders, the combatant commanders, about what is lawful and what is unlawful. Can you talk about the mantle of responsibility you wear as a JAG, or you wore as a JAG, and please editorialize for us on the DoD's decision to eliminate some of those senior JAG positions and to, as Pete Hegseth said, dispense with stupid rules of engagement.
Yeah, well, you mentioned the firing of the Judge Advocates General. Specifically, back in February of last year, Secretary Hegseth fired the Army and Air Force Judge Advocates General. And for those folks who don't understand how the JAG Corps is organized, the Judge Advocates General are the senior military lawyers in each of those services. At the time, they served as 3-star generals, and now their successors are 2-star generals. Bottom line is, one of the things that I and a number of my colleagues who are former and retired JAGs were worried about was that the firing of the TJAGs signaled an effort to essentially remove JAGs as obstacles for whatever the administration wanted to do with the military. And sure enough, we were right. We have seen since then a number of situations where the military is being misused, in some cases, we argue illegally, to advance the agenda of this administration. And so as a JAG, it was my responsibility when I served to advise commanders, as you said, advise commanders not only on the laws of armed conflict when we were engaged in military operations, but also on matters of good order and discipline. As the JAG, I was responsible for administering the Uniform Code of Military Justice. I worked with commanders who had to make decisions about whether or not to prosecute someone for offenses they committed, and we would together ensure that accountability occurred whenever a military member violated the law, disobeyed the law. So, when you say the mantle of responsibility, it is a significant responsibility. We have a saying in the military: JAGs advise and commanders decide, which basically means we provide legal advice to commanders who then have to make the decisions about whether or not to prosecute. But what that does is it trivializes the significant role that JAGs have in providing that advice to commanders, who in most cases will follow the advice that their JAGs give.
That was part 1 of my conversation with Major General Stephen Lepper. For the full interview, check out my Substack page, and please consider subscribing. Everything we raise there goes back into this show. Thanks.
Love this video? Support independent media and unlock exclusive content, ad-free videos, and custom emojis by becoming a paid member of our YouTube channel today. You can also gift memberships to others. Let's keep growing together.